has been using a lot of different online platforms, and so I'll turn it over to you, Melissa. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joe. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm glad I'm able to join the meeting today. I did go back and watch the recording from the last time. I was very sad to miss that and took a spill down the stairs at work, unfortunately, and was out for a couple of weeks. So my apologies for missing that last meeting, but definitely glad to be back at work and to be joining and to have all of you join today. So it's good to see everyone's faces, even if we're just on video. So thank you and welcome to the State Advisory Council for Exceptional Children meeting today, August the 20th. As Joe said, I'm Melissa Knight, the new chairwoman for SACEC, and I'd like to just thank everybody again. And Joe, do you see if Lisa has joined us? I know she had mentioned wanting to just say a few words at the opening, but I don't see her on the list yet.
Yeah, I don't see Lisa's name on here as joining yet.
Okay, so we'll maybe give her an opportunity to do that if she joins us a little bit later. I will start kind of the same way Lisa did last meeting with a few announcements and housekeeping items. So just please be aware that this meeting is being videotaped and broadcast so that others in the state can be informed of our work and participate. We hope this provides an even wider opportunity for us to share information and get feedback from around the state. We do need to have our videos on, but please mute your audio except for the times when you do wish to speak, and hopefully that will help minimize background noise. And the toolbar at the bottom of your screen does include your mute button and a hand icon if you wish to raise your hand to indicate that you have a comment or question. You can also use the chat feature to send us messages or questions. And thankfully, Joe is helping me monitor these as well. We have a lot of information to cover today. It is a virtual meeting format, so it's more difficult to see when folks need a break. So you are welcome to chat us if you need us to take a brief break. We would also ask that if you do speak, please begin by stating your name. Brandy's very kind to continue to take notes for us, and we want to help her by stating our names before we speak so that it's easy for her to get those notes. And now we will go straight to our roll call. So I will read each of the SACEC members' names, and I ask that when I call your name, you just unmute your microphone and speak to us, telling us yourself, where are you from, and who are you representing on the council, just like we did in the last meeting. So I will start again. Melissa Knight, I'm the chair, the president at Farmers National Bank. I'm here in Lebanon, Kentucky, in the center of the state. I also help run Working the Puzzle for Autism. I have 2 children with special needs, and I'm representing members meeting the requirements of Individuals with the Disabilities Act. I will now go through the roll call as I have received that from Joe. Lisa Hutchison. See her list. Okay. Anita Dowd. Julie Rubemeyer. Okay. Anna Light. I finally have one. Eric Umstead.
Hi, my name is Eric Umstead. I'm here in Murray, Kentucky. I represent post-secondary institutions that teach pre-service special ed teachers.
Very good. Thank you, Eric. Libby Suttles.
I'm here. I'm from Danville, Kentucky, and I'm the director of Wilderness Trace Child Development Center, representing children who are preschool age with diverse abilities, and I have a son with special needs.
Very good. Thank you, Libby. Jessica Duenas. . 。 . . 。. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . Trisha Gibbons, Danny Hughes, Brandy Hitzelberger,
Hi, I'm Brandy Hitzelberger, and I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I have 2 children with exceptional needs, and my son goes to Kentucky School for the Blind. And I think I represent, I don't really know which one I represent.
I think it says here, Individuals with the Disabilities Act.
Okay.
Representing individuals with disability. Thank you, Brandy.
All right.
And Brandy's our secretary, so thank you. Kim Chevalier. Okay. Ravon Sims.
Hello, I'm Ravon Sims. I'm the director for the Division of Education in the Kentucky Department of Corrections, and I represent adult corrections, and I also have a son with exceptional needs.
Thank you, Ravon. Greta Hilton.
Good afternoon. I'm Greta Hilton, and I'm the Associate Commissioner for the Office of Special Education and Early Learning at the Department of Education. And my role on the council is to represent homeless youth through the McKinney-Vento Act, as well as the IDEA fiscal components.
Very good. Thank you, Greta. Barry Lee. I don't see Barry on there. And then we do have 7 vacancies, as Joe mentioned earlier. So, Joe, did I miss anyone, or did anyone join after we started?
No, I think you covered everyone. Just everyone be aware that because of term limits and so forth, we do have some people who are transitioning off. And so it doesn't look like we have a quorum today, Melissa. And so today's meeting would be for informational purposes only.
Okay. Can we vote on the last meeting's minutes or anything like that, or do I need to pass over that?
I think you can pass over that.
Okay. Very good. All right. Well, thank you, Joe. Well, given that we are not going to review and approve the minutes, definitely if anyone has any questions about anything in those minutes, they can pass those along to us, or if there's anything that they would like to bring up about the minutes, they could do that at this time. We just won't take a vote on those. Okay. Hearing none, we'll move into the presentation portion of the meeting. So I'll take this opportunity I know Greta is with us, Associate Commissioner of the Office of Special Education and Early Learning. And as I understand it, we may have the interim commissioner, Kevin Brown, or we may be fortunate enough to have Dr. Glass with us. So I will pass the meeting to Greta.
Hi, thank you. Actually, Dr. Glass has joined the meeting, so I would like to introduce you to Dr. Glass, who is our incoming commissioner, who will be on board in just a few weeks. So I will go ahead and turn the meeting over to him and allow him some time to get to know the council.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Greta, for the introduction. It's delightful to get to connect with you, even though we have to do it over this electronic format. I'm still in Colorado, and my role right now is packing and trying to do 2 jobs. My family has all relocated to Kentucky already. They're getting ready to start school in whatever form that's going to end up taking. We've got a 7-year-old Chase who will be a 2nd grader, and an 8-year-old Nora who will be a 3rd grader. Both of our kids are special needs kids, so this is something that I'm very familiar with. And I also want to let you know that in the 5.5 years that I worked in the Colorado Department of Education, I worked in the Exceptional Student Services Unit, which supported gifted and talented students and students with disabilities. And this group in Colorado was one of the groups that I worked to facilitate in that state. So I'm familiar with your role and deeply appreciate the time and commitment and effort that you put into advising the state on how we serve kids with disabilities. And also this is something that's both personal to me and professionally really important, the work of supporting kids with disabilities and making sure that they have access to a great education just like any child in the Commonwealth does. So I just wanted to pop in and introduce myself, say hi, and say that I look forward to working with all of you going forward, hopefully getting to meet you and shake your hands in person at some point. If we all survive the apocalypse here, we'll get to do that, I hope. But I really appreciate the work that you do. And something that's a passion for me, and look forward to getting to work with all of you. I have a few minutes if there's anything that you want to inform me of or let me know about some of the work that you're doing or any questions that you may have at this point. I do have a few minutes I can spend with you.
Well, welcome to Kentucky. The pandemic has been especially hard on us because we're Kentuckians. We like to hug each other, not just shake hands when we meet people. So it's been a really tough time, I think, for us.
Definitely. Yeah, one of the reasons that we're returning home is to be close to family, and that's robbed that joy from us. While we're able to sort of drive by and wave, my parents are in the high at risk category, so we haven't been able to see them in person, and won't until we get through this in whatever form that takes, hopefully sooner than later.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Glass?
This is Brandy Hitzelberger speaking, and I just wanted to say welcome. We're really excited to have you, and my son is at School for the Blind, and I know that we would love to have you out there visiting and seeing all the things, the great things that both state schools are doing at School for the Blind and School for the Deaf. So.
Great. I really look forward to that, Brandy. And I think it's something that both schools have already reached out about setting a tour. So we're working on getting that on the calendar, but I really look forward to that visit as well. Thank you for the invitation, and it's in the works.
Dr. Glass, I think they're actually both on your schedule already. So
awesome. Great.
Hi, Dr. Glass. I'm Eric Umstead. I'm out here in the far western part of the state, just a couple of miles from Tennessee. Again, just welcome to Kentucky, or welcome back. We're glad you're here.
Thanks so much, and I look forward to getting to meet you and learn about the preparation programs that are in place in the state. Kentucky, like every state, has a challenge in finding, attracting, and keeping special educators. And so this is really, really important work, and also thinking about how we can support the practitioners that we have out in the field, and our university partners are a great asset in making sure that work continues forward. So Eric, look forward to meeting you in person and doing work with you in this area.
Thanks very much.
Okay, well, it doesn't sound like there's more questions or anything that you need to inform me of today. Please know that when I relocate to Kentucky, I do look forward to working with you and learning about what concerns and priorities and capacities we have in Kentucky to support these incredible kids. And you can count on me as a partner and an advocate for you in this work as well. So I look forward to getting to work with all of you, and thanks for the time this morning, or this afternoon in your case.
Dr. Glass, my name is Joe McCowan. I help facilitate this group, and I just want to tell you thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate that.
Thanks, Joe. I look forward to meeting you too. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you. Greta, did you want to go on with your KDE update and reopening guidance? I know you had that presentation next on the agenda.
So actually, it's really not a presentation. I believe next on the agenda, I think, or at least the one I'm looking at, I could be totally wrong, is Tony Constatman, who's going to share a little bit with you about the communications update. And so what I really wanted to do is I wanted you guys to be thinking as we move forward with the communications update and you're looking at all of the guidance out there. The guiding question that I had for this group is the reopening guidance and support meeting the needs across the state? And have you noticed a gap in the guidance, or are there additional resources that you believe we need to create, particularly out of the Office of Special Education and Early Learning? And taking that back to the role of the council being to advise the state of unmet needs. I really would like for you just to be thinking about those questions and listening to everything that Tony's going to share with you, because there's a lot of information out there. But it's really the role of the council to tell us if there's something that we're missing and that we're happy to work on. So I will not drag on with that and turn it over to Tony.
Great. Great. Thank you, Greta. I appreciate the welcome today. I know that I was invited yesterday to the DOSE meeting, and I appreciate that invite as well. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If you can just let me know when you all see that. I think I've met some of you all before. My name is Tony Constatman. I've been the interim communications director for KDE and the Kentucky Board of Education, obviously for the Kentucky School for the Blind and the Deaf, since about mid-January. And it's been a great experience so far, even though COVID has come in and kind of dampened the spirits a little bit. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm going to share with you today, I wanted to just let you know, this is what I share. So every week we have a superintendent's webcast. It's Tuesdays, every Tuesday from 2 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. And even though it's called the superintendent's webcast, it is open to the public. So anybody and anyone can tune in and listen to the topics that are on the webcast. You can go through the KDE Media Portal. You can just Google KDE Media Portal and hit the Watch Live link, and you can go, and it's always live streamed for the media, or not for the media, but through the media portal for the public. We do that to be very transparent, and then throughout the meeting, we always our agendas stay pretty clear. And pretty current in terms of if we have any new guidance documents that are usually released on Mondays, those are usually gone over by KDE staff. And then we also have updates. We always have a representative from the Department for Public Health. This past week, we had Dr. Stephen Stack on. Normally, we have Deputy Commissioner Dr. Connie White, that has been kind of our designate at KDE. And she works very closely with KDE in terms of developing guidance for us and for our education department. So, and then as part of that, I do communications updates. And so this is the update that I shared as part of the superintendent update on Tuesday. So I'm going to just go through a couple of these slides with you. We hosted a virtual town hall for local school board members last week, Thursday. And it was during the evening. It was because we wanted to reach out. We did one for teachers. It was about a month ago, in an attempt to go over the flagship Healthy at School guidance document. I'm sure that you all are familiar with this. This is the document that was given out towards the end of June. It's been updated one time. And it goes through just kind of what our expectations are for the beginning of the school year for reopening. And so we went over this and had questions and answers that were submitted from local school board members. And we just basically hosted that for 2 hours. So that went really well. And then every time that we have a webcast or an advisory committee where we are taking answers as a staff, we log every one of those questions and we put them into our FAQ document. So therefore, not only can people go back and watch these meetings, they can go back and go back to a log of questions where they can actually read them if they need to. So that was the virtual town hall. The other thing that we are real excited that I've been giving updates on is the Coverings for Kids program, which is First Lady Brittany Bashir launched on August 4th. She came onto the webcast and told our superintendents first. This is an attempt to help our school districts with the much needed PPE that our school districts need in order to reopen their schools. So what we've been doing is try to help them obviously connect with our school districts, which are serving as the local points of contact for community members who may want to donate masks or other things that they are in need of. This says 55. I think we're close to like 90 districts now that are participating in this. So it's a really good program. It was an opportunity where districts were in need and community members were wanting to support. And so there was just a natural need and there was a want. And so the First Lady figured this was a great way to kind of connect the two. And that's kind of where we are with that. This is, I wanted just to kind of show you every week. I always let people know because a lot of people don't know about the Department of Education's main webpage. So when you go to the KDE main webpage, this is what it looks like on the left. And this PowerPoint, by the way, I can share with you and it is accessible. So I just wanted to let you all know that. We go through and we made this COVID-19 page. I guess it was back in towards the end of April, or it was April. It took us a long time to actually have a special COVID-19 page, but we knew we wanted to have a page where everything was in one place because there was so much stuff that was coming out, and we wanted to be able to manage it in a place where people could find it. So when you actually go to the KDE web page and you click on the COVID-19 page, you are taken to this we're on the right where you have this educate, feed, support, and then we recently added this green reopening tab. When you go to the green reopening tab, you are taken to the reopening guidance, which is one option, and then the non-KDE resources. In the response to the crisis, we've been providing, guidance and solutions that focus on, our three areas, which is educating, feeding, and providing support to our districts. And since the middle of May, we have been releasing, I want to say we're close to 24, so like 24 or 25 guidance documents to all of our superintendents and districts regarding reopening schools for the 2021 school year. And so we keep track of all of those things. And this is what we've done so far. And all of these things are there. When I send this to you, you'll be able to click on them. So you can click on each one. As you can see, we started with May 15th, which was the initial guidance for schools. And mind you, in the middle of May, we were also dealing with graduations and how do you turn stuff in as well. So while we were closing out the school year, we were also trying to prepare for the reopening of a new school year. So this particular set of guidance is focused on the reopening. And then you'll go and you'll see we have everything from facilities and logistics to exceptional learners, preschool students, which this group is particularly interested in, but then also daily participation and non-traditional instruction, academic reentry, workplace health and safety, everything up to the two guidance documents that we released this week, which was the small group guidance documents, which will be talked about, and then also the how to track participation in Infinite Campus, because that can be kind of complicated as well. So every week I go over these things just so people know where they are, because they are very, very helpful, and they are very specific. And I will tell you, from a communication standpoint, I get calls every week from outside of the state where people want to have copies of our documents. There's different universities are wanting copyrights, if we can release these copyrights because they want to use them in their instruction. WKU, I just gave them, everybody's wanting copies of this stuff. So I know even from telling on our web pages hits that these links are very popular. Our COVID page has been very popular. And, so we're always looking for feedback on what we can do better and how we can communicate better. But what we came up with was that COVID-19 page. This is that FAQ page I was telling you about. When you go to the COVID-19 page, it's called the COVID-19 Answers to FAQs for Kentucky Schools and Districts. This has actually been updated since the 13th, and I think there's now more than 1,000 questions that are in there. It's a Google Doc link, so you can use the search key and really type in something. And this is just a screenshot of what it looks like. But that link is open and it's available to the public as well. So you can just type in a question or a word and see if we've answered it before. We also update and pull things off. So there's been questions about graduations and stuff that we already took off of there that are no longer relevant. And then I always remind people to watch the governor's press conference at 4, or I guess at 4 o'clock Eastern time, because as you know, COVID-19 is it's a very fluid situation and things are changing every day. And a lot of what we do at the department is based on what happens with COVID. So we always encourage people to listen into the COVID-19 press conference, because a lot of what we base our facts and our guidance on is what's being based on what's being released by DPH and the governor's office. I also wanted to share with you, I think that's it on my slides, because then, if you want to ask any questions or anything like that. But I also wanted to share with you that we have also brought together our student advisory team again. And I'm really, really excited. We have a new student from the Kentucky School for the Blind, because our previous school student had graduated, and she is amazing. I have to tell you, she is just truly amazing. And then we still have 2 students. We have 1 student from the School for the Deaf that has returned to her home district in Hickman County, but then we have another student from the School for the Deaf, and they are just wonderful active voices on the advisory council, along with these other 27 kids that, Greta has sat in on some of these meetings, and she can tell you how wonderful this group of kids are this year. They are so active. They are so they just want to help, and they want to participate. And I think you all will be very happy with the voice that they bring from KSD and KSB. In fact, one of them shot a video on masking up already. I don't know if you've seen some of these videos about Mask Up Kentucky. They came to me and said, some of them said we want to participate in this. The girl from the School from the Blind did a video. So hers will be coming up soon. I'm just very, very happy with this group. This group of students is phenomenal. So we'll be meeting with them again on September 15th. And just really, really very, very pleased with how the group has come together. So do you have any questions or anything for me? I'm, of course, always looking for great stories to tell about all of our schools and our districts. So please feel free to let Greta know or let me know. You all know how to get in touch with me. Always willing to tell great stories and share the great work that is going on in our state. So please let me know if you have any questions.
Tony, can I say something? Melissa?
Sure.
This is Brandy Hitzelberger. I just want to say I do enjoy seeing your videos about the student advisory team, the mask up, and all the little comments that you see on Instagram and Twitter. I think that's great, and I have enjoyed hearing their voice. I think that you're doing a good job with that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. If y'all have any other questions, feel free to reach out. Brandy, I think we follow each other on Twitter, so you know how to get in touch with me if you have any questions. And I'm right down the street in Louisville, so I was very excited. I went up to KSB for their Braille competition, and I haven't been back to visit since because of COVID. So, but I am planning on getting over to Danville and visiting our schools and being able to tell stories. I'm very excited. I'm definitely a storyteller. My background was as an education reporter for 15 years before I got into PR. So I am a storyteller by trade. And I certainly love the position that I'm in now to be able to tell the stories of our schools and our students and our staff. So please reach out to me if you have any questions, and I will let you all get on with your meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay. Greta, I think I might be looking at the right agenda now. I must have had an older version. So I think the next one is the KDE update and reopening guidance. Is that right?
So really, I don't have a formal presentation because I wanted to take the time to allow Tony to show you what we have as far as the communication that's out there. And then Sylvia Starkey and Veronica Sullivan, who are directors in the office, they both have additional presentations to share with you about things that are going on in the Office of Special Education and Early Learning. But before we jump into Veronica's presentation, I do want to pause and go back to those guiding questions and ask you, now that you have gone through the communications update, is there anything that you can think of that we haven't discussed or shared guidance around for students with disabilities or preschool students?
Of course, this is Melissa. I would just comment, I think the guidance that I've read is very good, but I just think that the schools have been overwhelmed with trying to figure out what to do for, you know, what I would say mainstream students. And so I've even been receiving phone calls from some of my children's ECE providers, and I'll say, great, you know, thank you for calling me. So what is our plan? You know, what are we going to do to serve the needs of Zachary? You know, have you had a chance to look at his IEP and how will we make this work? And most of the time, when in all the phone calls, it was, well, we haven't got that far yet. So, you know, school here in Marion County starts Wednesday. And I think they're still just digesting everything. And I will say that they are keeping very open lines of communication. So I think that's very good. And for a lot of parents that aren't involved in groups like this, they may be lacking some of that information about what to even ask for. I know in the last meeting, I think Brandy might have been the one that talked a little bit about being overwhelmed about being a parent at home and trying to figure out how to document those things. And I think that's definitely the case with a lot of people that we're hearing from locally, where both parents are working. Both parents have to go back to work. And so in Marion, they're on a completely virtual program until September 28th. And so they're trying to figure out, how can I get a caregiver, not just me as a parent, but a caregiver who in many times is an older caregiver, like a grandparent or something like that, to help this child get online and do this kind of activity. So I think those are the challenges that they're facing. I don't know that there's a really good answer for that, but that's just what I'm hearing a lot about.
And Greta, out here in the West, I'm hearing from teachers the stress and the fear that they have relating simply meeting IEP objectives. What's going to happen if they can't progress monitor on time? What's going to happen to the fact that their reasonable objectives were calculated based on a reasonable school year, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety among the teachers from a variety of schools, because just in our local area we have schools that are choosing to open face-to-face, schools that are choosing to open and allow hybrid classes, and teachers are busy now creating paper packets to send home to children, preparing face-to-face lessons, and figuring out ways to do this online through Microsoft Teams or Zoom, or here they're using a lot of Microsoft and Google, I think. But I think from a standpoint of the public schools and public school special education teachers, what I'm hearing is there's just a lot of anxiety, and anything we can do to ease that under the current circumstances would be, I think, appreciated. And Melissa, just to throw something out there, if you live near a university, if parents live near a university, I know several of my students are currently either babysitting or working with preschool students. They mask up. They're very responsible, and special education students in general are I think really well suited to address the needs of young people. So if you have that resource, or if people have that resource near them, I encourage them to reach out, because the students definitely need the money. At a lot of universities, they're doing hybrid or online classes, so they've got time, and that might be a good resource to help parents in need.
It's a great idea.
Greta, this is Brandy Hitzelberger. I have been hearing some about learning pods and them pulling in, a select few students with different learning needs. So I think I hear about it, and I'm sure it's just starting and they're just planning them. But I think as a parent, you talk about reopening and guidance and support and meeting needs. I think, that's popped up and we've been hearing about it, but, is that a possibility? And I think I'd like to hear about more. What does that look like? Is it possible? Yeah, what does that look like, and can it be done? Like I said, I keep hearing it pop up, but I guess I just want to know, is that an actual possibility? And, yeah, can it be done? So, I'm trying to look back at your question and think about a gap in guidance or resources. I think it's a great idea. I love the idea. I just, as a parent, I don't know if it's been communicated or not. Is it something that's going to happen, and really, what does that look like? And I know it's probably something that's still being talked about. So, we don't want to get our hopes up if if not. So.
Really, really good feedback. And I think as we dive deeper into the couple of presentations that directors are going to share with you, I think it'll answer some of those questions. The one thing I do want to touch on, though, is what Brandy just mentioned around the learning pods, or what some people across the nation are calling pandemic pods, which kind of tickles me just a little bit that we have spun this into a really positive term. But many of those are not occurring. Actually, I don't know any of those that are occurring through public schools. These are often things that people are doing, just as private learning pods. Private, individual people are going out on their own and charging some private fees to parents to do that. So, it's not something that we have released any guidance about, and certainly not KSB or KSD, because we're not equipped to be offering those types of services, right? Because we're a state school. So I did want to just touch on that a little bit and let you know that there's a lot of information out there online, but most of it is in the private sector and not through public schools. So I will turn it back over to you, Melissa, or you can move on to Veronica, however you guys see fit, but please continue to be thinking about the guiding question. And as we go through presentations, we will certainly come back and revisit those.
Very good. Thank you, Greta. Along with that, we do have some guiding questions on the agenda for the presentations from Veronica and Amanda. And those include, based on the identified challenges, what are the most urgent topics that we need to address and in what order? And what are the target audiences and timing of delivery of this support? So with that, I will turn it over for considerations for reopening schools, exceptional learners and preschool students, to Veronica Sullivan and Amanda Waldron.
Thank you, Melissa. This is Veronica Sullivan. I am going to keep my camera off. I'm sorry for bandwidth sake. Amanda's going to present our slides, so you'll be looking at slides. You won't have to look at a blank screen of me talking. Before I get started, I know, Tony did a really good job of doing a guidance overview, but just to get a flavor of the group, would it be helpful to just briefly scroll through the Healthy at Schools guidance that Tony talked about before I get into the reopening considerations for exceptional learners in preschool?
I see several heads nodding up and down, so I'm going to say yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure. So I think it's relevant that you at least see it, because the guidance that we developed for exceptional learners and preschool students it's connected to it. It's meant to be a supplement to that particular document. We call it our flagship document. So I'm not going to go in depth on it. I'm just going to give a basic overview and just sort of scroll through the sections so that everyone sort of gets a flavor for it. So, Amanda, if you'll display that, we'll get rolling.
I have it displayed right now.
Okay, I'm probably delayed. Not yet.
Okay.
I apologize.
Is everybody else seeing it okay?
We can see it. Yeah, we can see it, Amanda.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So, still not seeing it. I apologize.
Do you want me to reload it, Veronica? Do you think that might help? I can try.
No, I think it'll show up. Do you want to, are you at the table of contents? I know what's in it pretty much.
Do you want me to pull it up right now? I'll go ahead and pull it up so they can see it real quick.
Oh, that's what I thought you were saying. You had the document.
No, I had the power.
That's why I was like, I'm not seeing it.
Okay, sorry. I just want to make sure you can see my screen.
Yeah, I can see your screen, just not the document. Okay, so this document is, if the guidance that Tony went over, all typically connects back to this guidance. So the Department of Education, along with the Department of Public Health, worked collaboratively to come up with this document. And this was the base document that came out in June, and it covers topics for districts to consider in their reopening plans. As you know, I'm sure you've heard, each district has the ability to develop their own reopening plans. And so what we wanted to do is provide them with information to safely reopen. So these are, with public health work, at the department at KDE, we are not public health experts. So really partnering was necessary and continues to be necessary as things evolve and as we continue to learn and things change with COVID-19. So it goes through social distancing, and it's pretty user friendly. It's very basic, it's bulleted, it's simple to understand. And it talks about, how you do that, what's required for that. It also has a best practices section if you need that. Talks about in the school, buses. It has graphics that can be shared with students as well. It talks about cloth face coverings and then personal protective equipment, or PPE, as we all know, what should be worn, when it should be worn, and who should wear those items. Then it gets into, and it's probably already there and it's slow for me. I'm sorry. Screening and school exclusion. So when they're talking about screening, they're talking about the health screenings, the temperature checks, when you do that, how you do that. And then if a student has a temperature, like what temperature, when you send them home, how long they should be. When they say exclusion, we kind of in special ed take that a little bit differently, but they're talking about when students can return to school. Talking about isolation. It takes them through some scenarios, and then it gets into sanitation and the environmental standards. So how to keep things clean, how to keep areas clean, how to wash hands, where to provide, like what to do with surfaces and high touch items. You'll see water fountains there, the buses. Food service, how to conduct food service during reopening. And it does provide some graphics, which is nice. And then finally is contact tracing. And in the contact tracing, I know there's been some confusion, at least with our districts, about we know that it's the job of the public health department to do contact tracing, but in this it's talking really about how you track students and staff within your building. And so it gives some information on that as well. So I know that was really quick, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone has kind of seen this document, at least an overview of it quickly, before I get into how we went a little bit deeper with exceptional learners and preschool students. Obviously, as you can see, when that document came out, there were questions about exceptional learners and preschool students because they require some, close proximity work sometimes, and they just have exceptional needs that may not be addressed in that general guidance. So I'm going to just go over the document that we created, and it is, let me just start off with our document is organized in 4 sections. The reopening considerations, and then we had multiple questions, as you can imagine, for special education and for preschool. So we have a section within the guidance document that talks about that, and we also have resources available. Next slide. Today, I'm going to talk about the reopening consideration section in my overview because that is the largest section of our document, and just give you some brief overviews. I just want to let you know that this information has been shared at multiple with multiple advisory groups, as well as on the superintendent's webcast that Tony was talking about. So we were able to get this information out to districts, the same information that you're going to hear. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is social distancing. And so in the guidance, we really wanted to remind districts to consider differentiating instruction for exceptional learners as well as preschool students when following social distancing. We gave them some strategies on how to prompt students, remind students, visual cues, just that type of thing, so that they would consider that in their reopening guidance. We also, this was a big one, what to do when students require staff proximity closer than 6 feet. We had lots of questions on this. And, as we know, there are students who have complex needs, as well as our younger students who will need a staff member to be closer than that 6 feet. And so within the guidance, we give some scenarios and examples of what personal protective equipment to wear when that becomes necessary, or when that's necessary, things like hand-over-hand instruction, toileting, feeding, a physical transfer of a student. And in those cases, what is appropriate. Obviously, we always recommend that they also work with their local health department, because there are a lot of students with individual needs out there, so we couldn't write to everything. So we do encourage them to keep in contact with the local health department with those individual student needs. And then social distancing within the preschool classroom. One of the concerns was around, how many students can actually fit into a classroom. As you know, if you've ever had a preschooler, you know, keeping them in a desk is not something that will happen very easily. But there was a guidance document that was put out by our Office of Finance and Operations that included a facilities calculator. So we linked to that as well, so they could easily find it. And what you do is you calculate the square footage of a room, the number of students you're going to put into that room, and that allows them to determine how many students can actually safely be in that room together. And then we also offer some strategies on social distancing for itinerant staff. That's our speech pathologists, our OTs, PTs, our special education teachers, our gifted and talented teachers, those teachers who travel from room to room. We provide guidance on minimizing that if you can, but also what to do if you do have to travel as far as scheduling and hygiene. We talk about special transportation. There are students who have special transportation as a related service on their IEP. So we wanted to remind districts that if a parent agrees and the district asks them to actually transport their student, you know, some parents may decide they want to do that rather than putting their child on a bus, that if they are a special transportation student in their IEP, that the district would have to reimburse them. So we go through what you need to do as far as that's concerned and that agreement. And then although the Healthy at Schools larger document I shared at the beginning does talk about food service, we did address food preparation and snacks because often in a resource classroom or in a preschool classroom, food is part of the day. So we give some tips on what to do with that, as well as reminding districts in their plans if they have a blanket rule, for example, that no food on the bus was the example that we provide them with, then they need to be conscious that there may be a student with a 504 plan or an IEP who actually is required to have that snack, and it's written into their plan because they may need that, a food or drink, you know, for health and safety reasons. So we just want to remind them of that as well. And then instructional experiences in the community. Community-based instruction is very valuable and we value that, but we wanted to help districts think through that a little bit, think about some potential temporary alternatives to community-based instruction. Are there ways to do that virtually, temporarily? And then also, if you do have to leave the building, what steps do you take to safely return to the building? Next slide, please. So we also talked with districts and reminded them about the least restrictive environment. Right now, with virtual instruction, that's considered a change of location, not a change of placement with the least restrictive environment. So we go into that a little bit, but what we really want to remind them is that there may be students who may need an ARC because, it would probably be a small number of students, but we wanted to remind them that being on long-term remote instruction may have caused a need for students' least restrictive environment to be reviewed when they return. So we provide them with that guidance as well. And then we talk about cloth face coverings and masks. And according to that Healthy at Schools document, students who are enrolled in first grade and above and staff should be required to wear a cloth face covering unless medically waived. In most cases, students with disabilities should be able to adhere to the requirements for cloth face coverings. However, some students, it may not be safe to wear cloth face coverings due to their age or their physical condition or their disability. So we go over that, as well as consulting with your ARC if there is an issue with a student wearing a face covering. And then we get into school health policies. And, you know, reminding districts that they need to build into their plans a plan for those students who may not tolerate wait times during those health screenings, those temperature checks as they're entering in the building, for example, and to plan for that. Plan for those students and what are you going to do in those instances for those particular students to keep that line moving and get them in the building safely. And then we talk about assessment and materials and what to do with those materials. Often there are high touch items, and students may use the same test booklet, for example, and we talk about how long you need to let that sit before another student touches it, what to do with it, wiping off keyboards, things like that, to keep it safe if you have high touch or multiple students touching items. And then we talk about centers in the preschool classroom and give some strategies on how to plan for those centers and remain socially distanced in that preschool environment, including grouping students into rotations is one example, or pairing students, or developing individual containers for students to use with materials. And then the last section we cover talks about scheduling and documentation under contact tracing. And, typically, again, we talk about those teachers who may move around, or students may go into a classroom where they wouldn't typically take attendance, and they need to really think about that and think about their transition times for both staff and students once they reopen. And Amanda's going to go next.
All right, good afternoon. So what I'm going to do is just share with you next steps as far as supporting schools and districts. So in the spring of 2020, in partnership with the Special Education Regional Cooperatives and the Early Childhood Regional Training Centers, we developed a webcast series for educators on how to instruct during distance learning time. And so we are going to continue that web series this fall. And the way that topics were determined for this web series was based on feedback from directors of special education as well as preschool coordinators. So they really helped to drive, what those topics would be this fall. We really wanted to get their input so that we ensure that we meet their needs. And so that's really the next step, is we're going to start the web series here in September. And so if you all have any questions around the reopening guidance that Veronica talked about, or the web series that's coming up, please feel free to contact us. And we really appreciate your all's time today.
We can also take some questions now as
Yes.
well. We just wanted to provide you with that contact information.
And Amanda, I just want to say, if you can send the presentation to me, I will load it into their Google Drive also.
Sure. Yeah, that's not a problem.
Very good.
So
Thank you.
questions?
I have a question, and I'm sorry for being late. It's Lisa Hutchison, and I'm just curious, and you may have even touched on this before I got on to the meeting, but how will you guys guide districts on compensatory educational strategies, and how will those kinds of decisions be made through all this time, at this kind of unprecedented time we have?
Lisa, I'm glad you brought that up. This is Sylvia Starkey. I'm going to go through that in our next section for compensatory education. So I'll talk about that then.
She'll pay you later, Lisa. You
That's
just
right.
introed her perfectly.
Thank you.
So any questions for us? If not, I'm going to mute my mic and turn it back to you, Melissa.
Thank you. And Lisa, that was a good introduction. I think that is our next item on the agenda, is considerations for reopening schools and contingency planning. And Sylvia, I will let you take the floor for that. There are some guiding questions on the agenda. What challenges have school districts experienced with contingency planning? What additional guidance is needed to assist school districts with contingency planning? And then what is the preferred method of delivery for this type of support?
I think I am. Oh, sorry, I was muted. So before we get into contingency planning, I really would like to talk us through the compensatory education and extended school year guidance document that was also released since our last meeting. It's really important to understand the differences between compensatory education and extended school year services. They're when we first started talking about it, we noticed that districts tended to confuse the two. And so the decision was made to really address them both, to explain how they're similar and how they're different, and put them kind of side by side so that districts could see those similarities and differences and be able to delineate which one we were talking about in which situation. So we did release this guidance document. It was released on July 20th, so exactly a month ago. But I'll walk you through kind of what happens. It can be found on the KDE website, and I will make sure that Joe has a link so that he can upload it to your Google Drive as well. It starts with just there's, the table of contents, and then it talks about just a brief introduction. It's really important to talk about FAPE when you talk about either one of these things, because FAPE really is what we're talking about. Compensatory education is the remedy for denying FAPE to students. So regardless of that instructional delivery model, whether it is in-person instruction, hybrid instruction, or remote instruction, no matter what the delivery model is, that local school districts still remain responsible for providing FAPE to students with disabilities. So some of the challenges that they've had is some services are just difficult or impossible to provide in person or not in person, I'm sorry, remotely. A good example of this, and it's not the only example, so I don't want you to hear me say that, but we tend to rely on orientation and mobility as a really good way to explain it. So there are some services that are O&M that are able to be provided remotely, but the nature of O&M services, some of those just cannot be provided remotely. And so when a district was to transition, we've been telling them to document when you aren't able to provide services. And then once the district is back in person instruction and you've seen exactly how much was missed across the end of it, that it's really important for you to talk about what are we going to do about it. There's a lot of discussion in terms of compensatory education around the terminology, and there's not a lot of agreement. I'm going to be honest. We've heard things like unfinished learning, lost learning, post-COVID instruction, compensatory education, and districts feel like they're being blamed for doing something wrong, and that may jeopardize their relationship with families when they call it compensatory education. Quite frankly, we have said, you can call it whatever you want and however you choose to address it. It's important to acknowledge that any services that were designed to place students in a position that they would have otherwise been in, but for a lack of educational benefit that resulted from a denial of FAPE, is a compensatory education service. So you can kind of call it however they whatever terminology they use is fine. It's just important for us to address the lack of services, to address the lack of benefit, and to realize that those things do impede FAPE, whether they were on purpose or because of the pandemic. It's important for us to remember we still are figuring out how to provide those services to later. Compensatory education isn't defined in the IDEA. You won't find it. It's actually shaped by case law, and it can be awarded to students as a resultant of an IDEA dispute or by their ARC team as a voluntary remedy for failing to provide FAPE. So the ARC will get together and they can make specific decisions regarding the type, the location, and the amount of services that will be provided. And we really just encourage them to wait until the district was back in person to have some of those conversations, because if you have those conversations right now, it's probably too soon because your district is still experiencing remote instruction. So they'll have to consider whether the student received all their IEP services during NTI, discuss whether or not a denial of FAPE occurred, and if so, how to remedy that non-compliance of the IDEA. It'll be important to remember that not every time will a denial of FAPE have occurred. A good example I can provide you is my own son. So he was typically getting, I think, 15 minutes twice a week, and during the pandemic switched to 30 minutes once a week. And he was in a group before, and when he had his 30 minutes during the pandemic, it was actually one-on-one. And so his services were actually more intense. While they were less frequent, they were more intense. And so there was no loss of educational benefit that happened. And so he wouldn't be receiving compensatory education for that. I wouldn't ask them to provide that to him, because actually what he received was actually better than what he would have gotten in a typical classroom. And it's really important to remember that that compensatory education isn't meant to punish districts, but it should aim to place children in the same position that they would have occupied, but for the district's violation of the IDEA. And they can receive compensatory education at any age, including while they're still in school or if they're past the maximum of age for eligibility. So that like anybody who was a senior last year. However, the services can't be provided post-secondary. So you couldn't use compensatory education to provide them things in college or some kind of post-secondary instruction. And there's some links to how you can do those. Extended school year is very different than compensatory education. It actually is defined in Kentucky administrative regulations. It's defined as specially designed instruction and related services provided to a student with disability beyond the normal school year in accordance with their IEP at no cost to the parent. There's actually a couple of cases, one of which is from the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. They have to, there's some really important case law in here that kind of really talks through what are the things that they need to talk about. So anytime you're talking about extended school year services, we call those ESY. You have to think that you have to be able to provide that extended school year is necessary to avoid something more than adequately recoupable regression. And you have to show that it's necessary to permit the child from benefit from instruction. When you're talking about ESY, you have to talk about a couple of things. The student's tendency to regress, their prior to regression, their ability to recoup lost skills, and their progress towards educational goals. ESY is really about regression without recoupment. So we know that in a pandemic and everything that happened, we would expect that all kids, disability or no disability, would have regressed as part of the pandemic. ESY is more about, are they unable to recoup those skills that they lost in a reasonable amount of time? And so the district is really going to talk about those things. And as a parent, the ARC should be part of that discussion. And it really talks about how, we expect students to regress, and students who qualify for ESY would likely have a significant regression, slow recoupment. They take a longer period than usual to recoup skills that they've learned. And they have to document evidence that the student regressed in their progress over a break in instruction, was unable to recoup those skills in a reasonable period. Not everybody qualifies for it. It's not an automatic thing. And the ARC determines all of the location times, and it should be done case by case. This next section that you'll see in the guidance is just a side-by-side to help really delineate the differences. What we really felt like was they really needed to see them next to each other to see how they're similar and how they're different. And so you'll see that this section kind of talks about what are they not, when and how can you provide services during those, when a student is eligible, how we determine the amount of services, where to document it. We get a lot of questions about where do I put this information? Do I put it in the conference summary? So for compensatory education, those kind of conversations would be documented in a conference summary notes. And in ESY, it's part of their IEP. So it's something they're talking about at every annual review. The next page just really talks about important things to remember in terms of compensatory education. And it also discussed about, important points for extended school year services. The final part of it really just goes through a question and answers section. There are questions for, there's actually broken down into A and B, answer A1, B1. The first section is questions regarding compensatory education. And the second section is questions that are in about extended school year services. So I'll stop here and ask if you have any questions regarding compensatory services or compensatory education before we move on to contingency planning.
Sylvia, it's Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi. I do have a question about when districts will make that decision, or when districts will they make decisions about compensatory education during the ARC meetings, or
absolutely. So that's the expectation. They should never make it without it being in an ARC meeting.
Okay, and so they could call an ARC meeting if they feel like, yeah, this is just such a crazy time.
And let's remember, okay, so it happened to every student, right? So we would expect that districts would prioritize students based on the amount of services that they missed across the pandemic, right? So likely the first kinds of compensatory education services conversations that will happen are students with significant disabilities that missed extensive amount of services that they weren't able to provide. Those are likely the first conversations that they had. Ideally, they may continue to have conversations through annual reviews. So it might be something that comes up at your annual review. It might be something that they hold a special meeting for, but we've given districts a lot of flexibility to determine when those conversations should take place. But like we said before, now is not the right time because we're still in the middle of it. There's still districts that are having virtual sessions. And so right now it's kind of hard to say, what do we owe in the end? But you would just have to come back to the table and do it again. So we've kind of encouraged them to just pause, wait, let's see what the actual denial looks like, the full piece of it, and then we'll move forward from there. But we have, encouraged districts to be really transparent with parents, to document everything, document what they did and what they didn't get, and how all of those things happen, so that when those conversations happen, they're a little bit easier to have. Good question.
That's good. That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? No? Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing that screen and switch to the other. So the next thing we're going to talk about today is contingency planning. That's the wrong one. Hang on just a second. Let me get it pulled up. I have 3 things I'm presenting today, so I'm getting them.
And while Sylvia's pulling that up, just remember that she will send me the presentation, and I will her presentation. I will load it into the Google Drive for you all too.
Okay, so the next thing that we were going to talk about is contingency planning, and we were getting a lot of conversations, a lot of questions from districts about what is contingency planning, what are the things that we really need to know, how do we have these conversations, what's required, what's not required, and so just a couple of like last week on August 12th, Greta actually sent out an email with some tips about contingency planning. So there's a few quick tips that districts really needed to know in terms of guiding contingency planning. The important things to remember is that there is not a requirement. There's no regulatory requirement to have a contingency plan. There are districts who have had them in the past, not typically Kentucky districts. Contingency planning is really something that came out of Hurricane Katrina. And so districts who have had large scale disasters in the past, who have had to quickly transition to remote instruction, places like Hurricane Katrina, places like New York City, when they had that large hurricane that hit and shut down lots of areas, they have done contingency planning in the past, but there is no regulatory requirement for that forces districts to have them. It's important to remember that school years should not begin with a contingency plan. Contingency planning is really to think about what is going to happen when things change swiftly. A contingency plan would have been appropriate in March when everything changed overnight. So we had no way of knowing on March 12th and March 13th, even that morning, that everything would be shut down that afternoon and that we would still be in August and have not returned. In some cases, nobody knew that. It happened super fast, and we had to quickly transition into a totally different type of instruction. But right now in August, districts have had since March to plan instruction, to think about how we can provide these services to students with disabilities in a virtual environment. We start the school year on an IEP. So we should be following the IEP at this point. So that will be important to remember. Contingency plans are not a substitute for an individual education program. We shouldn't just say, it shouldn't look like a brand new IEP. It's more of a conversation that districts can have with parents to really discuss things ahead of time. ARCs must convene and develop an appropriate IEP and can or may elect to develop a contingency plan to accompany it. And the ARC minutes should capture that discussion. So that conference summary section is going to be really important. It should all be documented within that conference summary. I've heard lots of different things from different districts, and I'll be honest, they're all different. They're all kind of approaching it in a different way. Some of them are pretty extensive, others are less so. It really is kind of a district decision on how they want to handle that. The concept of the contingency plan is to describe the offer of FAPE during times when districts are forced to pivot quickly and change the delivery of services rapidly. We kind of talked about what that looked like whenever in March. Contingency plans for the remainder of the 2019 school year were presented as a good faith effort in providing FAPE when it was really unprecedented. A lot of that conversations were happening early on to help parents understand, we know we can't give you everything that we had on there, but here's our good faith effort to give you as much as you're able to. It really should ensure that all stakeholders, which includes students, parents, teachers, everyone who would be part of an ARC meeting, that they know what to expect with regard to the delivery of special ed and related services when location changes happen suddenly and unexpectedly. So just to remind you, moving to virtual instruction is not a change in placement. It's actually a change in location. Districts are able to make changes in locations. That's not an ARC decision. That ARC decides placement, but moving to a virtual environment does not deny placement decisions. It doesn't amount to a change in placement. IEPs must continue to be developed, reviewed, and revised by the as required by the IDEA, and it must be based on the individual needs of students. So that's kind of the top tips that we had. But the questions that we had for you is we're still getting a lot of conversations happening about contingency planning, and there's still we talked to a group of doses yesterday, and there was still a need to really discuss it further out, to really continue this conversation. And so, the guiding question we had for you today was really, what challenges have you and school districts experienced with contingency planning, and what additional guidance do you think that we need to provide districts to assist them with contingency planning? So we welcome all your feedback.
The other thing that I would ask, I would be very interested in hearing, especially from parents, is, and this is really not something that we have discussed before. So Sylvia, I apologize that I'm jumping in.
I don't mind.
Without discussing with you before. But is a contingency plan just more confusion, or is this something that parents would welcome to discuss? Because as Sylvia mentioned, it's not part of the IDA. There's no requirement to have contingency planning. It's something, obviously that OSEP, the Office of Special Education Programs, has really pushed states to consider, because the benefit add really is so that districts don't have to have a zillion ARC meetings should they have to pivot quickly in settings, right? So like if you open and, suddenly, the district is faced with an outbreak, and then, overnight, like what happened in March, you go to remote learning. And so the contingency plan is to then allow parents to know exactly what offer of FAPE is being provided, and know what services are going to continue and how those are going to continue through that virtual environment. But again, like all of the questions that Sylvia asked, I would also like to just tack one more onto it, since we are actually, with this group, we have the opportunity to talk to parents and family members. And I would like to get your perspective, which is a little different than the perspective that we get from districts.
I'd also like to add, it should look more like a conversation about, what do we know about your child now that we didn't know about them before, right? So when we transitioned in March, very quickly, we may not have known that your student did not have access to the internet. There was no way for us to know that. It was nothing that we'd ever discussed before. So we didn't know that when we sent you your speech, Zoom link, that you couldn't access it. There was nowhere for you to go to get that information. You didn't have a computer. You didn't have access to the internet. So what do we know about you now, so that when those things happen, we can get you the things that you need quickly? Another good example is, therapy equipment. Are there things that your student was using in a classroom that they had access to at school that on March 13th, when those doors closed, that they no longer had access to, but they really needed for instruction? Do we know now that we've got to go to the school, we got to send somebody there to pick up your stuff and drive it to your house and drop it off? because we need to know that he's got to have access. We need to make sure he has a computer. We need to make sure that we load things differently. If there's no internet and we can't get you internet, we need to know that we have to load things onto a flash drive for you, that you don't have a printer, that you might access things differently, that there may be things that, impede your ability to engage online, and ways that we can remedy those things so that you are able to receive your services as much as possible virtually.
This is Lisa. I think that this is a great time to talk about this because of exactly the things that you've talked about. We know now what happens when we have to split second go to remote learning. Now we are in a position to know why that didn't work well as a family, why that didn't work well. If we just had these things, it would work better. Or if we just had this as a back, in the back of our minds, that if this should happen again, these are the things that my student needs or that my child needs. So this is, I think, is a perfect time to talk about a plan because we know what we would like to have had happen, but couldn't happen. So I don't know. I think it's a perfect time to, from my perspective as a family member, a parent, I would be happy to have a conversation with the district to say, we could have made that work if we just had an iPad, or we could have made that work if we had this piece of equipment, or we had, if we could have continued in some way. If I had more instruction on how to be a good e-helper, those are the things that I think this is a perfect time to talk about with family members so that they could say, we could have made it work had it not just been a stack of papers, if I'd had more direction on how I was to do it, or whatever the case may be. But to me, this is a great opportunity for families, for districts and families to talk together about a contingency plan, that, and it might help parents understand more of what the differences between a contingency plan, compensatory education. We're not there yet. We're not to that. And so I guess that's my thoughts on it, is that this is a perfect time to really talk about what are the minimum things that I feel like I need as a family member to make this happen for him or her. So I don't know, it might be strike while the iron's hot, while we've got an opportunity to really have input from families. And it's kind of like they said before, at first we're all gung-ho on packets of stuff, and then we kind of tapered off and said, oh no, that's way too overboard. We've tapered off on that. So we learned from that. I think we can also learn from, what did I really need? What were the minimums that I needed to make this happen for my student, for my child?
This is Brandy speaking. I agree with Lisa. I think it's a good idea. I do think it can get overwhelming if you're in an IEP meeting and it's 4 hours long and you've got all these people in there, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, let's talk about contingency planning too. So, I think that's something to think about. But there were, we had to feel our way through it and figure out what all my son needed. So, we were dropping things off back and forth. So it would have been nice to, know, yes, we need a slant board, we need something for seating, all these items are a definite thing that we need. And this might be something, this might be a little off track, but I'm thinking, what do we do for those kids though that can't sit in front of a screen? And those that are, I guess you say the 1% that aren't sitting in front of the screen and can't do in TI? You know, do you just offer compensatory ed? I think I'm concerned of what do we do in that situation? You know, if you're making a contingency plan, or if a parent's frustrated, you know, how do we make them feel less frustrated or angry? You know, if they don't feel like right now, I feel like I'm Alex's one-to-one. So, and that's fine. I'm doing what I got to do, but how do we calm the waters, I guess, so to speak,
Sure.
and make parents feel supported, and feel like their child is getting the education they need and deserve? Does this make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it absolutely makes sense. And I think that's the intent of contingency planning, right? So if we know that these things aren't working and there are things we need to address, ideally the ARC would get together and have conversations that say things like, we know he doesn't do super great in front of the screen. How can we provide specially designed instruction in another way? Is there a way we can do it differently? I think, we're going to really rely on districts to be creative in how they can apply specially designed instruction to different types of situations, different type of, both synchronous and asynchronous learning, right? Can we do them online? And how do we do special education online? I think we've got pretty well figured out, but also how do we do it offline? Right? How can we still provide you with specially designed instruction if you aren't able to access the internet? How do we do that for those kids? And those conversations with districts are going to be where all of that occurs. So those conversations in your ARC meeting that's what the beauty of contingency planning is, right? Is for us to be able to talk about how do we do this asynchronously, and can we? And if we can't, then that would be when compensatory education would come into play.
Thanks. Sorry, I agree.
It all is interconnected, so it makes a lot of sense to kind of connect the two.
This is great conversation. I just want to remind everyone we have about 30 minutes, and I do know that Sylvia is going to present a due process update, and Dion is going to present an update on our co-ops. I will be providing a link to an exit slip at the end of this meeting, because I know this is not enough time today to get to all of your questions and all of your needs. And so please, at the end of this meeting, take some time and put in your information about concerns and questions and things you're thinking about, so that we can go over that information. That's critical feedback for us. So just wanted to keep us on track.
Very good. Thank you, Joe. Okay, well, Sylvia, based on that, then do you want to move on to the due process update?
Sure. So I just wanted to kind of remind you that we will be doing a due process update at every SACEC meeting. You should be receiving due process hearings in your email. Joe emails them to you as we post them online. If you haven't been online, I would love for you to personally email me if you don't know where to find the due process hearings online, and I will be happy to provide you with a link. They're actually on our dispute resolution webpage on the right-hand side, but if you email me personally, I'll make sure that you get a direct link to those, so that if you wanted to look at them in the between when we send them in and when you get them, that you'd have access. They're always posted online. When we looked, there was actually 7 hearings that came out since our last meeting, which is not typical. Usually we have like 1 or 2, but I think they posted a bunch in order. One of the things that I really wanted to just point out within those 7 hearings, the first is, do you have any questions about what happened? But I wanted to kind of hit the high points from a couple of them. I think it's really important for us to notice that over and over in those hearings, they talk about the burden of proof and the burden of persuasion. So it's really important to realize that the party who is proposing that the agency take action or grant a benefit has the burden to show the proof of what happened. So if a parent was to initiate a due process hearing and say, I'm requesting relief, then it would be on that parent to prove whether something did or did not happen by the evidence. So the first due process hearing really talked about child find, and it talks about, when you talk about child find, some of like the highlights of that hearing were just things like it said the claimant must show that the school officials overlooked clear signs of disabilities and were negligent in failing to order testing, or there was no rational justification for deciding not to evaluate. The IDEA requires more than just the existence of an impairment. It requires that the impairment adversely affects the child's educational performance. And it also talks about how in that case there was evidence that the student had late or missing assignments, but there was inadequate proof that it was tied to any IDEA qualifying disability, or that in regard to the student, that the student was unlike any other student. 18, 19, 17 really talks about the appropriateness of the IEP implementation and placement. The parents were alleging that the IEPs that had been created had really just minimally changed over the years, and the hearing just found that the ARCs consistently crafted those IEPs to challenge the student and cater to his individualized needs as appropriate at each annual review. That there was a lot of research, discussion, and planning that take place in the development of the IEP. All of the petitioners' questions were repeatedly addressed during conferences and implemented into IEPs, and that there was consistent communication and reporting between teachers and the parent, and that the staff met with them kind of thing. And it goes on to talk about how although the students struggled with many of the goals because they were challenging, there was ample evidence that he had made appropriate progress along the way. There's another 18, 19, 18 really talks about placement, IEP implementation, and records transmission. In this case, it was an out-of-state IEP, so the student had moved from another state. It really talks about there was a law enforcement intervention and whether or not charging the student with crimes constituted a change of placement. And so this thing that the school district charged the student with a crime, and then the parent alleged that that changed his placement. And they said actually there was no proof that the sheriff was under the control of the school or had the power to constrain the deputy sheriff from creating a report of the event any more than motorists in an accident have the power to direct the police to report or not report it. So there was no change in placement. It really talked about suspensions and how there were less than 10 days of suspension. And so the manifestation was not required in that. And then they talked about how there was an increase in use in the calming room, but the record did not establish that the use of the room was so great or indifferent that it was contemplated by the IEP that it constituted a change in placement. And they also discussed that how Kentucky is not required to implement an out-of-state IEP, just that we have to provide FAPE. And so it could have been, a lot of things could have happened. I think they were trying to say that Kentucky IEPs were insufficient in that, and that hearing actually found that they weren't. And then it talked a little bit about behaviors and how the IEP was not implemented in the behavior intervention plan. And they just said that the mere fact that the behaviors occurred was insufficient to warrant an inference that the plan was not being implemented. The fact that in some instances the behavior escalated out of control and crisis management was required also does not warrant an inference escalation techniques were not attempted, or they could not have been attempted prior to reaching the crisis point. The next one is really, it's 18, 19, 21. It was about basis of knowledge and placement. There is a litany of things, and it talks about how disciplinary referrals in and of themselves do not necessarily indicate a basis for referral to special ed and related services. I'm going to try and go through these pretty quickly, but if you'll have any questions, please ask them. 18, 19, 26 was about transition and social graduation. It found that the student was denied FAPE in transition, and actually said that there was nothing in Kentucky policies to prevent them from participating in commencement. There was then the next one was 18, 19, 26, which was an ECAB response. ECAB is the Exceptional Children's Appeal Board, so that's how you appeal hearings. And they basically ordered that the school took the necessary steps to ensure that the student was able to participate full time, to allow that student to participate in social graduation, whether or not the diploma had been issued, and that they allowed the district to defer the diploma to be able to order the relief. And then the last one was 19, 20, 14, which was really about the PASS program and placement. If you notice, I think the biggest thing that I've noticed when I was reading through these to prepare them for you is most of these are in regards to IPs or placement, but that would make sense because hearing officers have to be about identification, evaluation, placement, or the provision of FAPE, right? So we would expect one of those 4 to be the highest. But the trend across all of these was really placement. So like I said, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And, you know, when you get them, you know, feel free to read them and ask questions when we get those at our next meeting. Okay.
Thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions about any of those? Okay. Well, we can move on to the cooperative update. Is it Dion Bates?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. So the guiding question for this will be, do you have any questions about the support provided by special education cooperatives? So you have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to say that I welcome this opportunity to share some of the work that's going on with the cooperatives. And please feel free at any time to stop and ask a question. As I move through these things, I'm going to share my screen.
And this presentation has been loaded in the Google Drive already, so thanks, Dion.
You're welcome. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so it would have the cooperative logos on the page. Is that what you might see now? Okay,
yes,
great. Thank you. Great. So I will just pause for just a second and back up. So my name is Dion Bates, and I'm one of the co-directors of Special Education Cooperative at Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative. So we're located in the very southeastern part of the state. And so I'm today going to meet just to kind of give you an overview of what's going on with the cooperatives since the last meeting. And
Dion, you would just need to minimize the Microsoft Teams group. That way they can see.
So you can still see that? Okay, I didn't think you could see that.
Yeah, it's kind of covering up.
Okay, now how's that? Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize it was doing that. Thank you very much. So the first thing I want to talk about is, let's see if I can get this to work. I'm so sorry. Okay, so the very first thing I want to talk about is kind of just back up and think about some of the things that the cooperatives had done in response to that shift in March to those non-traditional instructional practices. So the first thing we did was we partnered with, of course, the Kentucky Department of Education Office of Special Ed and Early Learning, and I know that Amanda spoke to you a little bit about those. So that partnership of providing some supports for directors of special educations, then in turn that they could support teachers and related service providers in their respective districts. The other thing that we did is we made a very quick shift to professional learning through a virtual lens. And so that meant that we had to shift kind of that traditional face-to-face to how we're going to deliver that virtually. And so that happened pretty expediently through just the cooperatives, quick response and quick thinking to that, and that partnership with the Office of Special Ed and Early Learning. So we have since then developed not only those virtual professional learning, but some self-paced learning modules that teachers and directors and service providers can work through that are personalized, that are timely, that are relevant, and that they can access when they have time to do that. So it's been a really good opportunity to allow learners to participate at their own rate. The other thing is that we've engaged in book studies, and we've established some professional learning communities. I'm so sorry. So let me talk just a little bit about that collaboration with OSIL, and I know Amanda talked about it already, but what I wanted to share with you on the screen is that we had some very specific topics that we knew were very timely and very important to both our directors of special education, our teachers, related service providers. And so those were created as a presentation, but also were provided as webcast recordings. And so we had, 250 plus directors and providers that were logging on and gaining information about what we felt was very timely and really important that we shared with with all of those folks that are providing supports to our students with disabilities. So we knew that that was really important, and that we tried to really just jump in there and address those needs as quickly as we could. I'm so sorry. This is, something's happened with my, I'm so sorry. Okay, so something is not quite right with my mouse is stuck. Okay, I'm so sorry.
That's all right. It seems to be clicking fast on you.
It is. It's the mouse is stuck. For some reason, my mouse is stuck. So I
But they do
apologize.
have the presentation to go back to for reference also.
I'm so sorry. Yes. Okay, let me just go back here and reapproach that. My apologies. So on this slide, one of the other things that cooperatives have done in response to supporting directors of special education is we created a Kentucky DOS support network. And so from here we have provided them with online learning modules and supports that they need to share with teachers and districts. So that's another thing that we have taken on. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about specifically what we have done here at Kentucky Valley Special Educational Cooperative, because I can speak very clearly about that one, because those are the things that we've really been engaged in. So the very first thing that we did was to transform our spring conferences, or our conferences that would have been face-to-face, into a virtual experience for our teachers. And as we did that, we created not the presentations, but then we had a mechanism that we would allow participants to participate in those, and then take a quiz, and then earn a certification or a certificate for that. So the other thing that we did was we changed our summer learning opportunities to summer learning academies. And so those academies were all virtual, and we had those for math, literacy, behavior, and low incidence. So we tried to make sure that we were really getting those opportunities for all of our teachers, and everything that we had was both had a virtual focus, but how could we do that with both high tech and low tech responses to those things. So those were really, really successful, and those have been really good for us here at the cooperative. The next thing I wanted to talk about then is, so another approach that we have done is that we looked at how could we support that, and so we have created a source at the Holler, is what we refer to that at, and that's our place-based social learning network. And so on the Holler, that's where we house all of the training opportunities, the resources, the tools, and those things that we have to support our teachers and our providers in this region. So on this one, we have opportunities that we have involved practitioners throughout the course of this work to be involved in really telling us what it is that other special ed teachers need, what administrators need, what directors of special education need. So we've worked through those tools, and I wanted an opportunity to show you our place-based social learning network. So I'm going to just click on this and let you go and see this. And again, as Joe said, this will be available, and this link is a live link, so it'll take you straight to the Holler. And I encourage you to kind of peruse through each of these tabs that are on this page here, so that you can kind of explore some of the things that we've done at the cooperative. But I'm going to click on this one. And I'm just going to make this screen big so you can kind of see. But again, in response to the current situation, we have tried to provide opportunities for teachers to have some virtual learning, some supports, and a network. So one of the things that we have is we call this a professional action network. And this is a professional action network of special educators across the region. And the special educators across the region have come together and have identified practices that we want to share with other teachers. So you can see that on this screen, these are teachers that are in the KVEC service area who have identified a need and then created a solution to some of those that need, as far as providing resources, tools, and you can see. So when you go on this page, you can just go to any one of these, and you can click on there, and it'll be those practitioners sharing about the projects, how they come to that idea of the need for that particular topic and kind of the action research that's around behind that. So I just wanted to show you that one, and then I'll take you back over here and to this page. The other thing that we've offered is the virtual professional learning opportunities. So you'll see that all the virtual professional learning opportunities that we offer at our cooperative are listed here. But another thing I wanted to share with you is the projects with the innovation projects. So we have innovation projects that teachers propose a project, and then they do the action research around that, and then they implement those in their school setting, and then they come back together in the spring, and then they talk about how that worked in their classroom, the tools and resources available. The good thing about this is that because we had so many practitioners doing this advanced work with the technology and the integration of that innovation, that we had teachers that were quickly able to shift or to integrate some of those tools that they were using from those projects to help them support during this non-traditional instruction time. So you can see that all of these teachers, you can see that if I click on one of those teachers, and I encourage you to do this when you have some more time, but you click on those teachers and then you have a little bit of biography about that teacher, but then you have their presentation, but then you also hear them talk about the theory and the thinking behind why they proposed that project and the work that goes along through that. So all of those special education projects, some of them were around innovations in elementary, some are middle, some are high school, some are specific about transition. So I encourage you to go back and look at those. One other thing I'd like to share is the development. We have partnered with the Big Cooperative and Digital Promise to develop some micro-credentials. And so this has been very timely and appropriate for our teachers because, we've shifted to this virtual learning. And so this is an opportunity for that very personalized professional learning for our teachers. That is at their pace and rate to have the best learning experience. So you see, we have through the Digital Promise some very specific tools for special education. So you see this one is around progress monitoring. So a special educator could work through this process over time through this professional learning experience to better develop their knowledge and skill around curriculum-based measurement and how they progress monitor. Another example might be the co-teaching for educators. And so they would work through this process as well to think about, good co-teaching practices, what that looks like, how are we best going to deliver good quality instruction to our students, because we want to make sure that all the instruction that we give every day is good quality, high quality instruction. And so this just allows them that opportunity. So that was just one of those things I wanted to share with you around the work that we're doing in terms of that virtual experience through that place-based social learning platform. So that's been an opportunity that we've been able to connect with teachers. So that was one of the things I wanted to share with you. And then the other thing is we shifted from those due process trainings and those supports that we've traditionally done in a face-to-face setting. Those now have been moved to virtual experiences. And so we've recorded those as well. And we now assign a quiz to go with those, so teachers can participate in those live, as we've offered those all across the region. But they can also then be able to participate in those at that district. The district can access this so that we have that onboarding support for teachers as they come along in that process. If they're hired later on, if they come on in August or September or October, that they all get the same kinds of training and understanding. So those are another thing that we've wanted to just highlight and talk about today. And then I have one more. Is just that at KVEC, we have really been thinking through that process about how is it that we best support our teachers to deliver the best lessons that they can. If we're looking at this virtual means, how do our teachers best deliver instruction and supports and all the things that our students are going to need? And so we've developed some tools that we've just shared with our districts, and those are checklists that we've kind of developed. But and the ones you'll see on the screen, the first one is around that virtual lesson planning and unit, and that takes a teacher all the way through that process about how do you present that in that Google, whatever that learning management system you're using is. But how do you support that? How do you look at what your goals are? How do you support that student's IEP and that goal and objective? But then how do you select the specially designed instruction? How do you ensure that the supplementary aids and services are there? And then how do we give that very explicit lesson with all the supports for students still that they can engage from whatever appropriate modality that might be? So that's been something that we've worked through, and so we've made these tools available on the holler for any of our teachers, administrators, principals, anyone just kind of guiding through that process about we really want to shift to that thinking about how do we do the best job we can to deliver instruction. And then the other one is that you'll see the tool there is how we facilitate that virtual professional learning. So one of the things that we've realized through just that feedback from the directors that we have in our service areas, and teachers, is that sometimes they just need some support thinking through that. How do you deliver that? How do we shift from this way of this face-to-face delivery to a virtual lens? And so this is just a checklist or tool to think them through that process. Again, it's just a kind of a starting point or a jumping off point for practitioners to think about, do I have all the components that I need to do a really good job to support the student, to make sure that my student gets all the things that they need? Or how do we make sure that teachers are getting all the supports and the opportunities that they need? So that's how we kind of arrived at those tools. So I just wanted to share those with you, and those can be on our holler. And I do encourage you to go there and to look through all the tools and resources that are there so you can kind of get a better idea. I went very quickly through there, so you probably didn't get to see all those. But and then that leads me then to the last slide. And I keep, something's wrong with my mouse. Technology's great when it works, right? But so this one is just questions. And if you all have any questions, I know I talked real quickly and I was trying to get us through to be respectful of your time, but please feel free to ask questions or ask for any clarification that you may need from me going very quickly.
This is Melissa. I guess mine is more of a comment. I would just commend you on those resources. I mean, that's great. I love the holler idea. I think that's wonderful. But the ability to record that training so that those teachers that come on later can still go back at their own pace, and even sometimes they want to go back and review that when it's more relevant to something that they're doing. I just think that's a great idea. So great job there.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, my apologies for the mouse that causing that to go back and forth.
Thanks for doing that in a quick amount of time, Dion. I know that was kind of rushed, but thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate that. And it's been a pleasure to be able to be part of the meeting today and just hear the feedback. And that certainly helps drive our decisions about next steps. So I appreciate that.
Just keep in mind, we posted the presentation in the Google Drive, so if you want to go back and click on some of those links that Dion was showing you, you can spend a little more time looking at that. They've put a lot of work into that.
That's great. All right, thank you. Joe, from a housekeeping standpoint, I know that Anita joined us and Lisa, but I think Ravon may have had to leave early. I'm not sure. Is she still with us?
I think Ravon just left.
Okay, well, I was going to say maybe we have a quorum now, but I think without Ravon we would not. So
we can just hold it until the next meeting.
Okay, no problem.
And I just want to mention, of course, we want to thank Lisa for her chair duties. Barry did a great job setting expectations, and I feel like we just keep getting better. Lisa did a great job, and then Melissa did great today. You're like a pro on here.
Oh, thank you.
So thanks so much. And Lisa will be working on helping us pull together the annual report for this last year's worth of work. She has a template kind of that Barry started, and then Lisa will, of course, hand that to Melissa, and then we'll talk about work coming up. So the November meeting, it'll be really critical for us to kind of pull everything together to prepare, and hopefully I'll have some more information from the governor's office for us as well then. So just wanted to say thank you for that.
Sure. Joe, I know that's the million-dollar question, but what do you think the odds are we'll get to meet in person in November? I know November 22nd through the 24th, I think, is the scheduled meeting day.
Well, I do know that typically we meet around our Kentucky CEC conference, and that conference has been canceled.
Oh, okay.
And so I think that we are still heavily looking at virtual opportunities. I know that that's kind of far out, and it's, it's hard to say, it's crazy times, but I'm just kind of operating under the premise that we're going to go virtual unless otherwise until we kind of get to next year, 2021. And I hope it does not linger on that long, and I hope things change and we can begin to come back face to face. But I don't know if Greta and or any of our directors have any information that they would add to that.
No, I think you did a good job of sharing, the answer that we're all hearing, which is, I don't know. I mean, it's bad to say, but, we have basically all in-state travel. We're all travel for state employees, in-state and out-of-state's been suspended. The only people that are traveling right now are primarily people that are working through KSB and KSD, and then that requires commissioner level consent. So, for now, until we hear otherwise, we are conducting everything virtually.
Okay. Understood. We're all in the same position here as well. So, so it's about 5 minutes to 3. I don't know, Joe, if you had any other business or if you want to give everybody a quick moment to run and get a drink or a restroom break before we begin our open forum at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, if we could take a quick break, that would allow everybody to just have about 4 minutes, and then we'll come back here at 3 and then ready to do the open forum. And it's unpredictable as to how many we'll have, but we'll do our best. So thanks. Let's just take a quick break.
All right. Thank you all.
I just want to remind folks that an exit slip has been created, and we really do want to hear your feedback, and we know that today's time has been limited, so please take some time and add your information into that link. I posted it within the chat feature, and I also sent you an email with that, so your feedback will be very valuable. Melissa, one thing I would also add is that we had established a communications committee a while back, and it's been a bit difficult to get that moving. And with the influx of members and so forth, that might be something that you consider as we approach November to think about how that group might work, because I know that could really be a good group to help promote the open forum and so forth. And so we may not have good attendance today, but I think we may be able to plan on that a little bit better. And then just Melissa, before we start the open forum, you can adjourn the formal business meeting.
Oh, okay. Yes. All right. Since it's right at 3, I will go ahead and do that. I guess I don't really call for a motion for that since we don't have a quorum, but I will officially adjourn the business portion of the meeting and bring that to a close. Thank you, Joe. I think I'll contact, did I understand that Barry also had administrative rights on that Facebook page?
Yes, I think that's correct. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I administer, I don't even know at this point, I think it's like 3 or 4 other Facebook pages for groups. So I have a routine of going on there and doing updates, and if he wanted to add me, I wouldn't mind to do that as well, just because I do it really frequently, and sometimes it's just as easy to do 2 or 3 at the same time, you know. So I may reach out to Barry about that, and then I'll think a little bit more about that before the next meeting.
I think that's a great idea. We rely heavily on our special education co-ops and directors to get the information out, and they do share it. And so I do feel like a social media presence would be a good benefit, though.
Absolutely. Okay, since it is 3 o'clock, it looks like it's about time to start the open forum. Let's see, I should start that with reading the opening statement, right? And then we'll go through a roll call. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, there's an opening statement, and then there's also a closing statement you will read at the end.
Okay. I've got that. Do you think we're okay to get started, or should I wait to see if a few more people jump on?
I think we're ready to roll.
All right. I'll begin. My name is Melissa Knight. Welcome to the State Advisory Council for Exceptional Children Open Forum. Federal regulations under the 2004 Individuals with Disabilities Education Act mandate that each state has a state advisory panel for exceptional children. The purpose of the panel is to advise and assist the Department of Education regarding the provision of appropriate services for children aged 3 to 21. As a result of executive order, the Governor of Kentucky has appointed members of the State Advisory Council for Exceptional Children, or SACEC. A majority of the members must be parents of children with disabilities or persons with disabilities. Others must be individuals involved in or concerned with the education of children with disabilities. The meetings of the council are held across the Commonwealth to allow for statewide public input. The bylaws of the council require public hearings, and one is held during each quarterly meeting. The secretary of the council will take notes of the comments made during the open forum. Please provide your name and email address to the secretary also, so the council may send a follow-up thank you for being with us today. The comments shared are reviewed by the at-large council and are potentially assigned to an appropriate SACEC committee for thoughtful discussion and deliberation. The designated SACEC committee will determine on a case-by-case basis what follow-up, if any, is appropriate, and will share its thoughts with the at-large council. In some cases, the council may request that the Kentucky Department of Education or other entity respond. During the public hearing, the role of the council members is solely to listen to what you have to say. Members of the council do not respond or offer solutions to the public commentary at this particular time. If you choose to speak to the council, please state your name. For confidentiality reasons, please speak only about your child and do not mention others by name. You may also comment about special education issues in a general way. The council members will now introduce themselves, and then each of you will have an opportunity to speak to the council. So since we're on a virtual format, I will announce each member's name, and since it is the open forum, if anyone would like to just say again who they represent on the council and their name to indicate that they're present. So I'll start with myself, Melissa Knight. I'm the president of Farmers National Bank, and I do have 2 children with special needs. I represent members meeting the requirements of the Individuals with Disabilities Act. Next, Lisa Hutchinson.
Hi, I'm Lisa Hutchison, and I represent individuals who meet the, or you just said it, and I would say parents, but I do represent students with exceptional learners or exceptional needs on the panel.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry. New wording.
Anita Dowd.
I'm Anita Dowd, and I represent individuals with disabilities.
Thank you, Anita. I don't think she's with us, but Julie Rubemeyer. Okay. Anna Light. Eric Umstead.
Hi, I'm Eric Umstead. I represent post-secondary institutions that prepare special educators.
Thank you, Eric. Libby Settles.
Hello, I'm Libby Settles. I'm the director of Wilderness Trace Child Development Center located in Danville, Kentucky, and I'm representing children with exceptional needs, the preschool age, and I also have a 22-year-old with special needs.
Thank you. Jessica Duenas. I don't think she's with us. Trisha Gibbons. Okay. Danny Hughes. Brandy Hitzelberger.
Hi, I'm Brandy Hitzelberger, and I have 2 children with exceptional needs, and I represent individuals with disabilities. Or no, I don't. What is it? I can't think it.
You do. That's correct.
Oh, I do. Okay. I keep thinking parent, but
it's okay. We're playing multiple roles. That's okay.
Oh gosh.
Thank you. Kim Chevalier. Okay. Ravon Sims. I know Ravon was with us earlier, but I think she may have had to step away. Okay. Greta Hilton.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Greta Hilton and with the Kentucky Department of Education, and I represent homeless youth through the McKinney-Vento Act as well as the IDA fiscal components.
Thank you. And Barry Lee. And I don't think Barry could join us. All right, thank you very much. I think that's everyone on the roll call. Is there anyone who would like to address the panel?
If anybody would like to speak, you can just take your mic off mute and speak, or you may use the raise your hand feature that's on the toolbar if you would like to do that as well. So we would like to make sure anybody that's in the meeting today feel free to speak before the council.
Okay, can I say something as a parent? First, I just want to say that I feel like, we're in an unprecedented time and everybody's kind of exploring new waters right now. And I think everybody's really doing a great job. I'm really impressed with what my son's school is doing right now. We got the new NTI schedule, and I thought it was very parent and child centered. But I've done a lot of thinking about just being a parent recently, and I feel like sometimes when things happen to our children, we get overly emotional and we get frustrated and angry, and sometimes we just want to be heard. And I think sometimes districts forget that. So I just want to say, just, try to remember that. I think we all just need to remember that during this time that we're all so stressed out that just try to remember that we're all going through a rough time. And especially sometimes those parents that have multiple children with multiple needs. So I don't know. Like I said, I think I do want to commend KDE and the school districts, because I know I would not want to be in your place, would not want to be making these decisions. But I think just seeing the co-ops stuff that they're offering and the things that are out there, I think it's really hard. And I know it's hard to be a parent right now. So, I know I'm just rambling, but I do think it's just a tough time right now, and it's easy for people to get angry and frustrated. So I don't know. I think we all just need to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Brandy. Joe, I know during the last meeting you used another platform to allow parents to send in questions. Is that being utilized this time?
No, it is not. We use the KDE Media Portal.
Okay.
And that allowed people to view the meeting, but they weren't able to speak through that. They were able to send email in advance, or try to send a message to others, but they aren't able to speak. And so the expectation is that the special ed co-op directors and others would forward the meeting link to their staff and directors. Sorry for my dog.
Okay.
Letting him growl it out. If he sees any movement out the window, that's how he acts. Greta knows. So I apologize for that. Best I can do.
I got it. I don't see anyone else with their hand raised. Does anyone else have any questions?
I just wanted to say something, just kind of step away for a second and just say it's Lisa Hutchison. And I just wanted to be able to thank this group for its last time when we met in this way. As you can imagine, there are so many things to be keeping your mind on at the time that, I let the time come in and go of being able to say thank you for your support, and for letting me lead the group last year. And it was just such a privilege to be able to do that. And I wanted to be able to tell this group, thank you so much for all of your support, and thank you so much for all that you do to assure that our students with exceptional learning needs, that their needs are met, and that we're advocating, but we're more than that. And I know that you all we'll continue to do that. And I know that you've got a fiercely new leader, so Melissa do a fabulous job. But I did want to just have just a second to thank everybody and tell you what a privilege it is to work with you. So work alongside you, and that's been a real privilege. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you
Lisa.
for your help, Lisa.
Mhm.
And so I have to tell you this story now that my dog has stopped barking. Greta was actually presenting to the Superintendent's Advisory Council, and I was tuned in, and her dog had a little bit of a fit, and so I had a little bit of a chuckle and a laugh, but that always comes back to you. Whenever you laugh at somebody, then that's how you get paid back.
Mhm.
That's right. It always comes back around.
We all feel like growling right now anyway sometimes, so it's okay.
I was so sure
one
my
thing
two
I
were going
wanted,
to join in. I thought my
one
two would join in when they heard
yeah,
yours barking.
gets you every time. But one thing I wanted to add, and I know that we don't have anybody else for the open forum, is just how timely what Brandy said, how important that message is, because how nice does it feel to be able to just kind of take a breath and let your guard down just a bit, to be able to know that, to see faces on here and hear their voices and just know that, hey, we can put things in perspective, and how nice and how much we take for granted the actual times when we're together face to face, to be able to have that opportunity to be with one another. Time is precious. So Brandy, I really appreciate you focusing us on that comment and really thinking about, if we're feeling that, how are our kids feeling right now as well? So I just really appreciate that. And I'll hand it back over to you, Melissa.
Thank you, Joe. I think you're right. I know in particular, being in the banking business, you kind of get that perspective of what people are going through, the anxiety. Some of them are facing economic hardships on top of everything else that's going on. And so we all just have to be a little bit more patient with each other, even though our own patience is often very thin as well. So thank you for those comments, Brandy. I guess I will read the closing statement for the forum. If no one else wishes to make comments to the council, please know that the council appreciates each of you for attending this public forum and offering your comments. Additional council meeting information can be found on the KDE website. As a chair of the State Advisory Council for Exceptional Children, I now declare this public hearing closed. And I would just add to that, thank you again to everyone for participating. I know you're all very, very busy and have a lot of different things going on professionally and privately, in your lives, trying to deal with the situation today. So I appreciate the hours that we put in this afternoon. And Joe, I wondered if you would mind just sending out that Google Drive link again for those of us that I don't seem to have that link anymore for some reason. I may be the only one, but just in case I'm not, if you wouldn't mind to just send a link out to that Google Drive again as well, that would be very helpful.
Yep, I will resend the email that I just sent with the exit slip and put the Google Drive link. I'll also put it here in the chat feature.
Oh, great.
Something that's neat about Teams is this meeting record stays here. So if you want to come back to this at any time and see that, it'll be right there for you. So I will add it in here as well. Another thing I happened to think about, Melissa, it seemed like the folks that weren't with us today are school district folks, and I'm sure that they are super, super busy working on things. And so that might as well be a reason for not being able to attend, which we understand.
Definitely. Definitely. Did anyone else have any other comments before we close the meeting?
Just wanted to say thanks. You did a great job.
Oh, thanks, Eric. It's good to see your face.
Awesome.
It's good to see everybody.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Yeah, you guys.
Have a good night. Thank you all.
Have a good year.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see everybody.